Stacking is a very personal endeavor. How you choose to stack is dependent on many different things. In order to determine why you are stacking, you need to ask yourself a key question. What are you trying to achieve? Is it wealth retention, profit, making money in the interim to accumulate more silver? Whatever it is, identify it and understand it. It is important to know why you are stacking so that you can use the most effective stacking techniques to achieve that end. There are so many different motivators and different strategies for stacking that they couldn't possibly all be discussed in a single video. But I will cover what I believe to be the two most predominant base strategies and what you need to consider in order to achieve success for each. First, there is the flipping strategy. I would venture to say that this is the most popular base strategy. It should be noted that flipping strategies can vary widely depending on access to markets and capital availability for purchases. But a flipping strategy can be successful regardless of the size of your budget. Flipping is basically buying a coin or bullion with the intent to sell it back to the market at a profit either near term or mid-term. This means what you buy and how much you pay for it is absolutely critical. The first thing to consider is to whom you will be selling to. Is there a market for the bullion you stack? In other words, do you have a buyer, which can also be referred to as a market, who is willing to pay enough for your bullion for you to cover your costs and still make a profit? Will you sell your bullion through eBay or another collector, possibly your local coin shop, or maybe a reputable bullion dealer? Each market will have different factors to consider. Make sure that you have considered all the variables when you develop your flipping strategy. And remember to take into consideration the always ignored hidden expenses involved with the flipping process. I'm referring to packing materials, envelopes, postage, driving fuel, coin flips, or coin capsules. There is a lot to consider when using a flipping strategy to ensure you are making a profit. With a flipping strategy, you will, of course, have to have the funding to purchase the item. Then there will usually be a waiting period for the item to appreciate in value. And this waiting period is usually measured in months or even years before you can realize a profit. That means those funds used are not available to you during this waiting period. Additionally, you will need to be very careful to always make sure you have enough fiat to pay your monthly bills and sustain you and your family's lifestyle. Then it is always a real good idea to have an emergency fund available so that you will never have to sell your coins or bullion before you can realize your profit. Then there is the time factor. You should never ignore or underestimate the value of your time. It is important to consider just how much of it will have to be committed to your flipping strategy. Factor in the time you will spend researching, shopping for the best price, eBay time spent posting and monitoring auctions, packaging time, and how long it takes to transport the item to your local mailing service. If your buyer is an LCS, consider the driving time to the local coin shop. Be mindful of all this time and how it must be factored into your profit margin for each item you flip. Properly calculating and considering all of these factors can result in a flipping strategy that is very rewarding and very profitable. But it is a lot of work, can require considerable capital that has to be tied up for possibly months or years, and you must have a savvy skill for knowing the bullion markets and what items in the future that will demand and appreciate enough for you to make a profit. Next, there is what I perceive to be the next most prevalent type of stacking, the saving stacker. This stacking strategy requires, again, having the funds available for your bullion purchases, knowing that this is a long-term strategy, most likely measured in years. This strategy involves also knowing where your buyer's market is and who will be willing to buy your bullion from you when you're ready to execute your exit strategy. Next is choosing which bullion items to buy that the market will buy back from you in the future. This is referred to as liquidity, or how easily you can sell your bullion items in the market. Then you will want to acquire those bullion items as close to spot as possible. This type of strategy is not dependent on premium appreciation, but only the spot price at the time of sale and the inflationary value of your bullion at the time of sale. What types of bullion you choose to buy will be very dependent upon what markets are available to you and what they are willing to buy in the future, not necessarily what is popular today. Remember, this strategy may involve years before you liquidate all or part of your stack. There is, however, some basic principles to bear in mind. If you live in the United States, then most believe that the American Silver Eagle is probably the most liquidable bullion to stack. In Canada, the Maple. In Mexico, the Libertad. Europe, the Philharmonic. Or maybe you have an industry buyer you have arranged a deal with who will take any type of generic bullion in any quantity as long as the purity is sufficient for their industrial needs. Hopefully you see the point. Where you live and the markets available to you are going to dictate what is the best bullion for you to stack for maximum liquidity and wealth retention. No one can tell you with complete certainty which bullion is best to buy because you are the one who will have to sell it, and only you know who and where that future buyer's market is. So if you cannot answer the question definitively, who is going to buy your bullion in the future, then I would strongly urge you to reassess your strategy and figure that out before you continue to buy any more bullion. Having thousands of ounces of silver in any particular form means nothing if you do not have the ability to liquidate it in the quantities that you need to, and potentially in a very short period of time that you may have to maximize your value potential. No one can truly predict the absolute top of a bull market surge, but history has shown that once it tops, it hasn't stayed there long, and then it usually drops very sharply, very fast. Many of us are stacking generic bullion in the form of coins or bars because it is without a doubt the cheapest bullion that we can buy, and we know that we are getting the biggest bang for our buck. All I would say is to make sure you feel confident that there will be a buyer for your generic bullion when it comes time for you to sell. If you have that buyer's market available to you, then statistically, you should yield the greatest wealth retention of anyone using this type of strategy. The same goes for those of us who stack poured silver. Be sure to track your paid premiums on poured silver and know who your buyers will be when the time comes. Another consideration for determining your stacking strategy is a global currency system collapse. Many believe it is inevitable and that this is only a matter of when it's going to happen. But when it does happen, global currencies or fiat money will have very little value for a while until the monetary reset, which means there won't be as many potential buyers for our bullion, especially high premium bullion. If your strategy involves selling to an eBay market or local coin shop, you may find it increasingly difficult to find buyers to buy serious quantities or high premium items in a hyperinflation economy. Perhaps the spot price will elevate enough for you to cover your premium margin, but I really don't think that you can realistically expect anything more than that in a collapsed global currency environment. I believe that the savings stacking strategy would best mitigate losses in the event of a global currency collapse, because its premise is that the bullion only has to be sold at or near spot for you to recover your original costs and retain your wealth. If such an event never occurs, well, then you still have your wealth retention and your hedge against a future inflationary economy. This strategy is also less time-consuming and doesn't involve having to control and monitor all the costs involved with the flipping process. A savings stacking is definitely a longer-term, lower-profit potential strategy, but it does have less overall risk, whereas a flipping strategy can yield much higher returns but runs the risk of hidden expenses disintegrating your profits. And in the event of a black swan event, the recovery of all the premiums will likely be lost. Neither one of these basic strategies is any better than the other, and there are hundreds of variations for each strategy that can influence its levels of success. Many stackers will combine strategies, like having some higher premium bullion for flipping near term and also bulk purchasing sovereign bullion for liquidity. Any combination imaginable is possible. The key is understanding what your stacking goals are, where your buyer's market is, and how to execute your strategy, being mindful of all the factors that can influence your success.